Alright guys, so today we're going to review the Vantrue N2 Pro dual lens dash camera. And what better way to review it than to actually plug it in my room and capture it HDMI out. Into the rest of the video, I just wanted to do a quick overview of the camera. This is the front lens. It is a 170-degree wide angle lens. I believe if you damage it that it is easily replaceable with a Dashcam lens. I did see a video where somebody took this device apart. It's not as easy, but it's not very difficult to take apart, and you can replace the lens. These right here are just hidden screw holes as well to get to taking this thing apart. Here's a vent hole, and there's another vent hole down here. Here's your power button. Just hold it for a couple seconds, few seconds, it'll turn on. Here's your menu button, and then here's your left and right to navigate that menu. And then the left button here, if you press that, it'll turn your microphone on and off. And the power button, if you just press that a couple times, you can go through the infrared LED setting to where it leaves them on, it's on auto, or they're just always off. And that brings me to this camera right here. This is your interior camera, and it is a 140-degree wide lens. And once you mount it, you can then rotate this lens anywhere. And like I said, it has infrared LEDs. They're 940 nm wavelength. So if you're looking at some additional lighting, that is possible. Vantrue does not offer anything, but on Amazon, I did find this device. It has 4 infrared LEDs in it, and this black plastic cover is just the infrared filter, and it provides 940 nm wavelength that will work perfect for this camera. It was $24 and some change. It also has auto on and off as well on that slider. It could be powered through like a battery bank and or micro USB if you want to extend it and plug it into your car and get additional lighting. You know, you might have a bigger vehicle like a Suburban or whatever, and these lights over here just may not reach to the back like you want. So something like this may be what you're looking for. And here's your emergency button. So in case you have something happen, you could press that and it'll protect that file. Here's your OK button. So when you're in the menu, that's just to select your menu system. Here's your screen. Let me power on real quick. And then here's the camera. What I'm going to do is I'm going to HDMI out. So everything that you see on screen, I will discuss all of that captured through the mini HDMI. And this is where you mount it in the car. It comes with a suction cup mount that is currently in my car. And it provides power. See those little prongs there? So within the suction cup bracket, once you push it in and then lock it in place, there is a mini USB port on the bracket itself. And you can just plug in your camera right into that. You don't need to worry about using the port here on the side, which is also usable for that, but it's mainly for transferring files from your SD card to your computer. You cannot use that for connecting to OBS or anything. You have to use the HDMI out if you want to do something, and you would probably need an adapter for that. Here's my capture device. I have a line input from my microphone that's across the room over here and where my TV is as well. So if I look up over there, then that's because I'm looking at the screen. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what is on screen right now, and we're going to go over that, real quick. On the top, it shows you your 1080p, 60 frames per second. I am recording right now only in front-facing camera. I don't have the rear camera on. I will turn that on in a minute, and we'll go through that real quick. And right below it is the plus or minus the exposure. I have it on 0. I highly recommend you just leave it on 0. If you do it on 1, it'll make it a little bit too bright and kind of washed out. Then below that, in orange, as it shows, it's all in color orange, meaning that I have a micro SD card inserted. I have a SanDisk class 10. It's one of those red-gray. It's 128 gigabyte. The camera, when updated to the latest firmware, will supposedly, I haven't tested it, accept as high as a 256 gigabyte micro SD card. And if there's no SD card inserted on screen, it'll show it in white, and it'll have a red line through it showing that there's no SD card. And then to the right of that, on the upper right corner, when you have the dual camera activated, it'll have the icon for the infrared light, whether it's on, auto, or off. So there's 3 settings for that, and you're not seeing that right now because I don't have the other camera on. You don't see the picture box on this side over here. So then below that, on the top part, there's HDR, which is your high dynamic range. I have that turned on. It just gives a little bit better color and contrast. And then below that is the microphone, which is also on. This does dual recording, and the audio shows up on both recordings. It's not the best audio. It is clear and very audible, but there's a lot of white noise in that audio recording. And then below that is the battery status. So whether it's running on battery power or it's plugged in, and right now it shows it's plugged in. The battery is only a 250 mAh, so if you plan on bringing this inside and actually recording with it, you're going to get about 12-13 minutes realistically. So here's the recording setup, system setup, GPS setup, files. And so let's go back to recording setup. We'll just hit the OK button that's on the front of the device next to the screen. And that's how you get into the menu. And then below it, there's a button with an M, and then there's a left and right, and then there's your power button on the far left on the lower side of the device, and that's how you're going to scroll through the menu system. So there's resolution. I have it set to dual 1920 by 1080p at 30 frames per second, and at nighttime it doesn't look quite 1080p, I guess. During the daytime it definitely does, but it does look like it has a little bit of a over sharpening effect, but it's not terrible, and it's not like really obvious. This is just kind of nitpicking if some of you are really interested. There's the 1440p at 30 frames per second. There's 1296p. I didn't even know that one was on there. I guess nobody really talks about it. I watched quite a few videos on the device. Here's 1080p at 60 frames, and of course these 3 options here. Oh, there's one more. There's 1920 by 1080p at 30 frames per second as well. So these other options are just for the front-facing camera. It's not going to record the interior, only if you set it to dual. When you set it to dual 1920 by 1080p at 30 frames per second, you are going to get 2 files written in the same folder on your memory card. It is going to be the time and the date, and then one file is going to be A and one file is going to be B. A file is your front-facing camera that is going outside of your windshield, and then the B file is going to be the interior, the one with the infrared light. There's loop recording. I have it set to off because I'm not going to necessarily use this camera as a dash camera. So what it does is it will set your files to 1 minute in length, and then it'll start recording another file, and then until your memory card is full, it'll erase the first file and keep on going, and then erase the second file when it needs to create another, so you'll never have to change out memory cards. There's 3-minute files doing the same thing, and then there's 5-minute files also doing the same thing. A lot of people set it to 3 because it breaks it down into smaller files. G sensor, this is in case there's impact. You can set it to whatever you want. I leave mine on off. Audio recording, the quality is really up there with a lot of other devices. The only downside is there's a lot of white noise in the recording, but you can still hear everything quite clearly. I'm not recording with the audio on the device right now. I am using a Zoom microphone to capture the audio, so what you're hearing right now is not the actual audio from the device, because I am capturing externally so you can see all this stuff on screen that I see. So we're going to go back because I have that to on. Parking mode, off or on. I'm not really too familiar with that. I think it has to do with if you hardwire the device, then it'll still record while your car is turned off and parked. But it says in the manual that it is not recommended that you leave this on for, more than 10 hours straight. And also you don't want to leave it in direct sunlight. So whether this is on or off is up to you, and whether you hardwire it or not. They do have a kit that you can purchase separately, which is not included, by the way. Exposure, I leave mine on 0. So let's go back. Number plate. This one I like. So I typed in my team name, Para-holiX. That is exactly enough characters, not including the dash, of course. But it is perfect. So that's what you're going to see on screen. You can put in whatever you want. Letters, numbers, there are no characters. Stamp. The date and time stamp, if you're going to use this as a Dashcam, then yes, you may want to have that on so you can prove. Just make sure you actually set the correct time and date. Logo stamp, this is not your logo, this is Vantrue's logo. Number stamp is the license plate that you typed in, whether it's your plate or your team name like I did, Para-holiX. Speed, this is if you have the accessory that is a GPS accessory, so they can track your speed, and of course the GPS location stamp. I do not have the GPS accessory. All it is the windshield mount adapter has the built-in GPS device into it. That is also optional and not included. So I have only the number stamp on, so that's the only thing you're going to see on screen, because I'm not necessarily going to use this as a dash cam. So let's go back. Rotate display. Depending on how you want to mount the device, rotate the display means that it'll just be upside down. There's a lot of reviews that I've seen where they discuss that their device was recording upside down even though it had it right side up. Well, rotate display was probably on by default. So just make sure you go in there and turn that to off. If you have a simple editing device such as iMovie, which is what I use, I edit on my phone or iPad, you can use 2 fingers on screen and you can pinch and twist to the left and then do it again and it'll rotate it for you all the way around. So the first would just be rotate at 90 degrees and then you pinch and twist to the left again, and it will fix that for you in case you need that footage and it's upside down right now. That's a simple edit that you can do, and that's something that I use. Time lapse. There's off, then there's 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Now, I haven't actually tested this myself, so I can't tell you for sure if it creates the video for you, or does it create a bunch of images that you have to stitch together? I don't know. I haven't tested that yet. So I'm just going to leave it to off because I don't plan on using that feature anyway. So, and then the power off delay. This is when you turn off the car. There's a slight delay. It'll give it time to record the remaining file to the memory card. So you turn off your key on the car, and then it gives it time to say, hey, oh, the power was shut off, so let me go ahead and stop this recording. And so that's something that you want to have on, in my opinion. It'll help with the memory card, preventing it from getting corrupt. Now, if you have, if you hardwire this device in, then you may not need that because it's going to be directly powered into your battery. But of course, that's an optional accessory. Alright, so let's go into system setup. There's language. I currently have that on English. Then there's all these to select from. Those are your languages. Let's go to format. All data will be deleted. I'm going to back out because I don't have an SD card currently in the device right now. This will format the memory card, so which is something you always need to do when you have a new device. Insert the memory card into the device if it don't recognize it. Even if it does recognize it, and then go ahead and format it specifically to the device by using that device. It'll always help. Let's go to time and date. I don't know why the date is off, so we're gonna go ahead and correct that real quick. Today I think is the 20, and then we hit back, and see when we hit OK, everything is set. So there you go. Auto LCD off. Hit the wrong button there. You want to turn this on. If you're going to use this device as a dash cam, if you leave it off, that means that the LCD is going to stay on. So anybody driving next to you in the dark or behind you, they're going to be able to see that you have a screen on. You want to turn this off. So I set mine to 1 minute because once you turn on the car, the device is going to turn on. And then in 60 seconds, the screen will shut off and it will continue recording, and you will be able to see that by looking at your emergency button and your OK button that is to the left of your screen. During the daytime, it's going to be very hard to see, but just know that it is recording. As long as you have a memory card in there and it's powered. And then of course you can leave it on for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, but I set mine to 1 minute, and that's what it is right now. Device sound, this is all your buttons, your menu buttons and stuff, where it makes the beeps and when it turns on and off. That's what I don't like any of those, so I always turn mine off on pretty much every device I have. Non-use, auto power off. Yes, if you're not using it, then it'll shut off on its own. You can set that. Frequency, of course, I'm in the States, so we use 60 Hertz. If your PAL region is 50. System information. This is my current firmware. As soon as I got the device, I went online to Vantrue's website and I got the latest firmware. I inserted it into the memory card. The device recognized it and it upgraded. This is the firmware that will fix the blue hue. If you get the one that has this number and IQ next to it, image quality, then it fixes the blue hue completely, and you'll see that. Upgrading, you can then format the memory card in the device before taking it out, because if you take it out and you put the memory card back in, it is going to prompt it to upgrade the firmware to the same firmware that is on. So if you don't remove the firmware, then it will do that every time you power the device on. So what I suggest is once the firmware is upgraded, don't power down the device, just go straight into your settings and format the memory card. So we'll go back, And then there's default settings. So if you no longer like this device and you're going to upgrade to something else, you want to return it back to Amazon or whatever it is, you can turn the default settings back on and it will set it back to factory default. So let's go back. Here's GPS setup. I'll go into that menu. I don't have the optional accessory, which again, it is separate and then not included. You can go into here and you could turn that off or on. And then the speed, you could turn that to, I'm in the States, so it's miles per hour here. Files, these are anything you have recorded on the device. I currently don't have my memory card inserted, as it's prompting me to insert that right now, as you can see. So there you have it. Those are all the files, all the menu systems. Here's some daytime footage of the camera. See how well it copes. And whether the infrared lights shut off when they need to be and when they're on. Because I have it on automatic, so we'll see if it looks like the interior is lit up or not. From here it looks like the lights are on, but I can't tell. We'll see what everybody's talking about. Some people say that you can see the license plates, and other people say you can't, or other videos. So we'll see. I believe from here you'll be able to see that license plate. But also another thing is, some people might want to use this camera for like a podcast, because under normal lighting conditions, if you turn off the infrared light and don't set it to audio, just set it to off, the camera looks normal, both of them, and you'll get 1080p front and rear facing at 30 frames per second. So you can set that on a tripod in the middle of a table or whatever your setup is, and you can have a camera on both you and another guest speaker or whatever, and just record it like that if you're not going to use like a computer or something like that. And you'll be able to then later on in editing, you can do split screen if you didn't want to say, or if you don't have a way to have like a wide lens. You know, some people don't want like a fisheye or something like that. You know, that'll be a wide lens to capture both of you in one frame. You can do picture in picture, or say you want separate backgrounds. You know, it could be for whatever reason. You'll be able to capture two people at the same time, and you'll have more creative input when it comes to the editing of something like that, picture in picture. You can full screen one person and not have the other, or you can just full screen the other person. You know, this way when it comes to your editing, there's a lot more that you can do with it, and you don't have to worry about zooming and cropping out somebody else when that person is talking, because you know, whenever you do that, you lose resolution because you're zooming in. So if you have a full 1080p recording on both people, then you don't have to worry about it. You just make sure they're in frame, which the front camera has a 170 degree lens, and the interior, the rear one, it has 140. So you don't really have to worry about the subject being in frame as long as the camera is facing them. So that's another idea that you can do with this. And also, by the way, it's dark outside. The sky is almost black. I mean, I can see a little bit of light within the sky because I can see the contrast difference between the trees and the sky itself. But the camera on screen, it looks much brighter, so it works a lot better in low light than your own eyesight does for you. And that's one thing that I wanted to note on here, because a lot of times a camera is not as good as your own eyesight, especially in low light, you know, or mostly in low light is where all cameras tend to fail, and this one is doing pretty good. And also, on speaking of low light, there is there's an optional accessory that you can buy. It's not exactly made for this, but you can use it. I saw it on Amazon, where it's an infrared light source. It was about $24, and it runs off of a USB, and you can run a USB battery bank or whatever, or you can hardwire it in, and you can mount it somewhere else. It's real small. It's only a couple inches wide, maybe about like this, and it'll add more light for this camera. That's the interior one that requires infrared, so it'll give you light so you can light up more of the back. Another thing is, if you know you're going to do something like that, a trick in editing is to make it black and white, and it also brightens the image, since you know right now under low light it's not in color. So all right, thanks for watching. So here's the light. I don't know where I can exactly mount it. Something like this. Hold on, the screen went dim. I don't know exactly where to mount something like this, but let's see if I put it in the cup holder right there. Is that enough light versus no light? Extra light in the cup holder. I don't know. I really can't tell. But if you could find a way to mount it, then that would work good for you. That's the only issue I have, really. But nobody can see the light, so that's kind of cool. I can just sit here and I can point it at anybody and whatever. Nobody can see it. I don't see any light coming off it. I mean, if I look closely, I can see very, very faintly 4 dim red LEDs. That's about how bright it is.